Okay, hi team, well done for watching this video. So there's going to be 4 videos to make up the theme 5 content. Obviously you've got the exam skill videos as well, but these are going to be focused on the content. So if over the holidays you're going through your revision and you don't really understand something relating to theme 5, then hopefully these videos will give you a helping hand. So the first video is on the Savannah Grassland biome. Okay, so this video sole focus is on the Savannah Grassland biome. We're going to start off with a little introduction to the savanna. Then number 2, we're going to talk about the nutrient cycle, before the water cycle and the carbon cycle. And then I have no idea, but perhaps the most important, I really don't know. Number 5, we're going to look at the impact of human activity on the savanna. So we're going to look at the impact of human activity. And then number 6, we're going to look at sustainable uses of the savanna. So if there's a part of that that you want to skip to, you can, but that's the plan for this clip, okay? By the end of the clip, you'll have the whole of the Savannah Grassland biome, all the information you could possibly need. Okay, so well done for watching. Let's get started. Okay, so the first section then, just a little bit of a section on the introduction, okay? So intro to the Savannah Grassland, just give you a little bit of an overview of what it is and all the rest of it. So, first of all, just for a visual, to make sure you're clear, it's what the Savannah Grassland looks like, okay? So you've got a few trees, sparse amount of trees scattered around, you've got some shrubs. The predominant vegetation though is obviously the really long grasses, okay? So this is what it looks like. And if you think then, in terms of a description, it's got scattered trees, just so you know for your own knowledge really. It's got drought resistant bushes. Now drought resistant bushes means that they can survive with a lack of water. So if there's a situation with a lack of water, they're drought resistant, they can cope with that for as long as possible. It's also obviously got an exceptional amount of grass. That grass is actually 4 meters high, okay? So it's got 4 meter high grasses. So that's just a little bit about the vegetation. Now it is, in terms of climate, it's hot all year. Okay, so hot temperatures all year round. It is found, because remember, if you were going to talk about it, you'd probably want to locate it. It's within the tropics. And it's like the merger, the continuum. It's found between the tropical rainforest and the desert. So what I mean by that is, if I just show you this diagram, so here's the world, you've got the equator, Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, and the grasslands are found between the tropics, so in this area. Now, what it means between the tropical rainforest and the desert is, here's the tropical rainforest on the equator, and the desert's up here with, you know, little to no vegetation, and the Savannah Grassland is found in between the two. So like it's the merging point where it goes from trees, fewer trees, and then the rare trees in the Savannah Grassland to eventually the desert. Okay, so it's found at the merger point really between the tropical rainforest, less trees, Savannah Grassland before the desert. It's like the merging point between them. Okay. So also have a wet season, which is in the summer, and in that wet season they have convectional rain. Now I'm going to explain convectional rain to you now, because it does come up quite a bit in theme 5, but it's nice and simple. Okay, so it has a wet season in summer, and in that wet season it has convectional rain. And if we think convectional rain works similar to convection currents in tectonics, obviously in the Savannah Grassland it's really hot. That heat is heating up the land, okay? Heating up the land. All of the air above the land here heats up. We know when the air heats up, it rises. Okay, so air's rising. And because it's rising, it is increasing the rate of evaporation. So the sun's heating up the ground, then all the air above the ground is heating up and rising, increasing the rate of evaporation because it's all going up. We know as it rises, the temperature cools, so it condenses, because it cools here, heats here, cools, condenses, and then lo and behold, you get precipitation or rain. Precipitation or rain. Okay, so that's convectional rainfall. Convectional rainfall is the sun heating up the ground, which heats the air above it, and then it rises. And as it rises, it increases the rate of evaporation. We know as it gets higher up, it cools down, so condenses to form clouds, which eventually rain through precipitation. Okay, convectional rainfall. So, to reiterate, in our first little introductory facts about the savannah, it's what it looks like there. Hot all year. It's got scattered trees, drought-resistant bushes, 4-metre high grasses. It's within the tropics, between the tropical rainforest and the desert. It's got a wet season in the summer, and it's got convectional rainfall. Okay, so that's everything for our introduction. Well done. Okay, so chapter 2 then of this video is on the nutrient cycle within the Savannah Grassland. So we're going to learn all about the nutrients within the Savannah Grassland in this section. You're going to see some of the worst drawings you've ever seen in your entire life, but use your imagination. I'm going to use paper, but I will recycle the paper, okay? So, section 2, nutrient cycle. If we have a think of this, another biome that you're going to learn about, or your other case study, is the tropical rainforest. If you think the tropical rainforest is literally trees, shrubs, some emergent layer too. There's so much going on in the tropical rainforest. Now, when all of that dies, it all ends up on the bottom of the tropical rainforest, and you have a huge amount of biomass, albeit maybe temporary, but you've got a huge amount of biomass there. Whereas in the savannah, if you think, you've got maybe one tree and then some grasses, maybe the odd shrub, right? That leaves very little biomass, very little like dead vegetation at the bottom. So it's no surprise then that in the savannah it stores less carbon. So it stores less carbon in the biomass than the tropical rainforest, because its biomass, it's like dead leaves and all the trees and all the rest of it, is far smaller than the tropical rainforest. Not only that, well, the reason for that, I should say, is it's got a shorter growing season, it's got less water, so far less grows. Okay, it's got a shorter growing season, it's got far less water, so far less grows. And also, due to fires in the savannah, there is often fires. Those fires burn that biomass. So by burning it, combustion, it releases the carbon back into the atmosphere, which means that it's not stored in the biomass anymore. So not only is it physically smaller, but often it gets burnt, and that releases the carbon back to the atmosphere, so it's not stored in the biomass. Okay, so if we think of it like that's the first store, is the biomass. Okay, another store is the surface soil. So what happens, what happens is some of the nutrients from the decaying vegetation makes it into the surface soil. So some of the nutrients from the decaying vegetation here makes it into the surface soil. Now, it isn't stored, it's stored there, but it decays rapidly because it's high temperature. So all of this biomass here is breaking down rapidly or quickly because there's a high temperature. So it breaks down, and another store of nutrients within the Savannah grassland is in the surface soil. Okay, so one store there, there's another store there. It's important to mention here that there is fires regularly in the in the Savannah grassland. Now those fires, let me draw a fire, it'll make me feel happy. So those fires, look at that for a fire, there we are, great fire that is, are really important because they burn the grasses, they kill the weeds, they prevent the trees from growing, so they're important for the grass, okay? But in burning, they release the nutrient, they release carbon into the atmosphere, but also the grasses that store the nutrients are obviously getting burnt. But something else that is worth mentioning is my little shrub here. So here's my little shrub. Now, my little shrub might get broken down by termites when it dies, okay? So my shrub has ended up in the leaf litter, here it is, and it's getting broken down by termites. When they do that, there's going to be extra nutrients here in the biomass. There's going to be extra nutrients in this one little area because this one-off anomaly shrub has been broken down by the termites, so it's added to the biomass here, and that little area of the savannah is going to become a nutrient hotspot. So if you think 3 stores of nutrients, one is the biomass, which stores less than the tropical rainforest. 2 is the very surface of the soil when the biomass breaks down, and 3 is nutrient hotspots where termites break down the shrubs. Okay, so 3 stores of nutrients within the savannah. Right, so number 3 then, nice short one, is the carbon cycle. Okay, so the carbon cycle, again, exceptional drawing coming your way. I'm going to compare it to the tropical rainforest again. If you think emergent, canopy, shrub, okay, so there's the tropical rainforest. Here is the savannah, odd tree, odd shrub, mainly grasses. There we are. So, obviously through photosynthesis, the vegetation takes in carbon and gives out oxygen, but it stores the carbon within it. So the trees, the vegetation, stores the carbon. It takes it in during photosynthesis. So it is no great shock then that there is less stored in the Savannah grassland than the tropical rainforest, because the tropical rainforest has got so many trees in it. Okay, tropical rainforest has got so many trees in it that it stores way more carbon than the Savannah grassland. However, very exciting, however, the savannah covers 20% of the world's surface, whereas the tropical rainforest only covers 6%. So because it covers 20%, that does mean that it can store not more, but because it covers a larger surface area than the tropical rainforest, that has to be taken into consideration, that it stores across a bigger area. Okay. Now also, we already mentioned the fires, but regular fires in the savannah mean that everything that is, all the carbon that is stored in the trees is actually burnt. And obviously, when the trees are burnt, they release all of that carbon back out into the atmosphere. So the stored carbon is then released back out into the atmosphere. sorry. So the stored carbon is released back out into the atmosphere with the regular fires. Right, I did get a little bit carried away then, and I did the carbon cycle as number 3. So number 4 now, the water cycle. Now, nice and simply for the water cycle is that actually 4 to 8 months of the year, so 4 to 8 months of the year, the Savannah Grassland is in a state of drought. Okay, so 4 to 8 months of the year there is not a lot of water stored in the Savannah Grassland, because actually it's in a state of drought and there isn't a lot of rainfall happening. Not only that, but obviously we're going to come on to the impacts of human activity later, but tourists visit the Savannah Grassland, they go on safaris and all the rest of it, which helps development, but actually they divert water for the tourists. Okay, so they divert water from lakes, rivers, reservoirs, wherever it may be, to the tourist hotels, to the swimming pools. Believe it or not, that's a swimming pool. Here's the person diving into the swimming pool. So they divert the water so that the tourists have enough water. They have swimming pools and all the rest of it. That actually means that the animals and the vegetation lose out. They may be short of water in those months where they're in drought as well, because it's being prioritised to the tourists. Okay, so it's just a little bit on the water cycle there. Okay, so section 5 then. Section 5 and 6 I think probably are the more prominent sections. They're all important though, obviously. So section 5, impacts of human activity on the Savannah Grassland. So what humans are doing to destroy or make better the Savannah Grasslands. Let's be honest though, probably destroy. Now, the main point that we're going to focus on in this is desertification. Okay, so the main human activity, desertification, we're going to look at how the human activity causes desertification. So the main thing we're going to focus on is how the human activity causes desertification. Now, desertification is where the deserts are growing. Okay, so desertification is where the deserts are growing, and that's bad because you know the desert is dry, there's little rain, so there's no water source, so you can't, there's very, very rarely any plants or animals. So the more the desert spreads, the more difficult biome you've got to contend with. People will have to move out, they won't be able to grow their crops, won't be able to get water, and the damage that's going to have to the wildlife as well. So that's what desertification is, where essentially the desert is growing. Okay, so if we think the human causes of desertification then, so what humans have done to cause it. The first one is climate change. So through our population growth, the Industrial Revolution, the burning of coal, oil and gas releasing carbon, and the enhanced greenhouse effect, that has all led to climate change, our climate heating up. And as a result of that, it gets hotter, okay, so obviously hotter, and we have reduced rainfall. Now all of that means that our land dries out. Okay, so our land dries out. Also, additionally to this, we might overgraze our animals, our livestock. What that means is we use the land too much. We put too many cows, sheep, whatever it is, our livestock, on the land again and again and again, and we don't give the soil time to recover. We could also over-cultivate. What that means is, it doesn't matter if you don't remember those words in the exam, what over-cultivate means is we plant too many crops too regularly on the soil. The soil breaks down, it loses its fertility. Again, it dries out, okay? So it loses its fertility, it loses all the nutrients, and again it dries out. All of that eventually means that actually, quite simply, the soil is going to be blown away. because by this point it is so dry that it's just going to be blown away and in's going to come the sand. So that's in the dry season. In the wet season though, because it is so loose, like dusty, in the wet season it will simply be washed away. If you think of increased overland flow surface runoff, your soil is basically going to be leached. It's going to be washed away because it's so loose and dusty. All right, so the first thing, the cause of desertification: climate change, reduced rainfall, overgrazing, overcultivating. So too many animals, too many crops, means the land dries out essentially. Because it dries out in the hot season, it's blown away. In the wet season, it's washed away. Okay, so another big reason is slash and burn. Slash and burn. So in this respect, there's not loads of trees in the Savannah Grassland, but the trees that there are play an important role with the soil. These trees protect the soil from the wind. Okay, so they protect the soil from the wind. Now, when they are chopped down, there is nothing to protect the soil from the wind anymore. So the wind blows the soil away. And that happens after slash and burn. And slash and burn is where we literally cut them down and burn them. Okay, we cut the trees down to clear them and we burn them. Now, if that happens, like we said, there's nothing to protect the soil from wind erosion, so it is eroded away. Also, when it did rain in wet season, precipitation, the trees intercepted precipitation. That meant that rainfall, that heavy rainfall in wet season, wasn't hitting the soil dead on. It was getting intercepted first. Now, when it hits the soil dead on, there's an increased overland flow and it literally washes the soil away or leaches the soil. Okay, so it removes the soil because the rainwater would have previously been caught by the trees, which would protect the soil from the rain, but now it hits the soil dead on and it washes the soil away. Increased overland flow, it gets rid of the soil. Okay, so that's another way, because when the soil's gone, desertification can spread. And then also in the slash and burn, the roots of the trees would have previously been providing some structure to the soil. They would have been holding the soil in place. But if you chop the trees down and the roots die, then there's less stability. There's less holding the soil together, so the soil becomes looser and off it goes. On top of this, aside from desertification, there's two other ways, other main ways that we are destroying the savannah. One of them is population growth. The savannah is populated by indigenous people and villages. Okay, some of those are nomadic, so they'll farm here and then they'll leave that area, farm the next bit, leave that area, farm the next bit. But population growth obviously means the chopping down of trees, soil being destroyed. And another one is actually tourists on safari. Tourists will go to visit the grasslands to go on safari, and the vehicles that they go around in will destroy the landscape and also the wildlife. Okay, so to reiterate, you've got desertification by climate change, reduced rainfall, overgrazing of animals, overcultivation of the land, using the land for too long. You should only use the land for 1 to 3 years, Before you leave it fallow to recover. Fallow means that you're leaving it alone to recover the nutrients. You let the nutrient cycle continue. You let the plants grow, die, go back into the biomass and then repeat to let the nutrients happen. So that's what should happen. But when it's over cultivated, it doesn't. All of that means it loses facility and dries out, and it is blown away or washed away. Another cause is slash and burn. Meaning that there's nothing to protect the soil from wind erosion, there's nothing to protect it from precipitation, and there's no roots binding it together, so the soil clears out. And all of this was a store of carbon as well, so all of this was a store of carbon, and it's no longer there to store it. And then in comes the desert. Two other ways that it's destroyed: population growth, building, and tourists on safari. Well done. Okay, so in this section then, we're going to look at sustainable uses. So what that means is how humans can use the Savannah grasslands in a sustainable way so that it lasts into the future. So they're not destroying it, it can last into the future. We're going to focus on how we can solve soil degradation, i.e. soils losing their fertility and drying out. So we're going to focus on how we can solve soil degradation and how we can solve desertification. Okay? So those are the two things we're going to focus on: sorting out how we solve soil degradation, i.e. keeping the nutrients in the soil, and sorting out desertification, so trying to prevent the spread of the desert. Okay, so strategy 1 then is to practice crop rotation and or really fallow periods. Okay, now we talked about this briefly already, but crop rotation is the idea that here is my field. 1 year I'm going to plant, I have absolutely no idea, but wheat, let's say. So 1 year I'm going to plant wheat. Now, the next year, I'm going to plant a completely different crop altogether. So in the same field, I'm going to plant, I don't know, something random, just soya or something like that. Okay, so I'm going to plant beans instead this year. So the next year, plant something completely different. And then the next year, I plant something completely different to that. Now the reason why, so crop rotation, you plant different crops each year because they use different nutrients. So the idea is that they use different nutrients. 1 year you'll use a specific set of nutrients, the next year a plant that uses a different set of nutrients, next year a different set of nutrients. So you're not draining all of the nutrients at the same time, you're giving time for each set of nutrients to recover. So that's one thing you can do to solve this, is crop rotation. Another thing is fallow periods. So you will plant your crops in this field for 1 to 3 years, and then you will move on to this field. You will plant your crops in this field for 1 to 3 years, and then you'll move on to this field 1 to 3 years, and then you might come back round to this field again. What this does, by leaving the fields fallow, leaving them alone, allows them to regain their nutrients. It allows them to go through the nutrient cycle, for things to grow, to die, to decay into the soil, and then repeat. So leaving the area alone for a set amount of years allows the nutrient cycle to recover. Okay, and both of those will mean that hopefully your soil will keep its nutrients, it won't degrade, and then your soil is looked after, and hopefully you don't have desertification either. Okay, so that's the first one. A second option is something called shelter belts. If If you don't call them shelter belts in the exam, you just explain them, that's completely fine. But what you do here is, here's your farm, loving these diagrams, here's your farm. What you do is you purposely plant some of those savanna trees and bushes. Okay, so savanna trees and bushes, little bush here, little bush here, around your farm. Okay, so you plant around your fields, and what that does is it could be forest or hedges, and it protects crops and soil from wind and rain. So if you remember from the last video, then you'll be this then protects. So planting shrubs and trees around your farmland area will protect it from wind and rain erosion, which will hopefully help. And another thing that does exactly the same thing is reforestation or afforestation. So reforestation, planting trees where they've previously been chopped down, or afforestation, you're planting trees, okay? So very similar, planting trees, and those trees are also going to protect from the wind and the rain. So there's another option there. You can also, these aren't all of the options, but you can also reduce your grazing numbers. Okay, so what you do there is you limit the amount of cattle that can be on each area. So you limit the amount of grass they're eating, of shrubs they're destroying, so the nutrient cycle can still continue on in the background. You could also, but it would be very hard, try to control your population growth, try and control the spread of your population across the savannah, and you could plant drought-resistant crops. Now, obviously, these are more expensive, the seeds, to buy than the others, so that is a negative to it if you were going to weigh it up. But you could plant drought-resistant crops that would grow through the climate change and keep the soil tied together and protect the soil and provide food for the people. Another one, the last one I'm going to talk about, is irrigation. You could divert rivers or lakes through channeling to your farmlands. So you could divert water to farms to make sure the crops grow and keep the soil moist. But in doing that, obviously you're going to create serious problems with lack of water. You might be taking it away from people and all the rest of it. Okay, so that's the many ways that you could sustainably use the savannah. You might have to weigh them up in the exam. I just want to say, I know this is a long video, and I just well done all of you for watching. Hopefully it's made the Savannah Grassland biome a little bit clearer to you. I think it will be important to know the Savannah Grassland, so if you do have any questions, please email me, but hopefully that's helped. I've also emailed you my overview for Savannah Grassland, so you've got this on your emails if you want to have a read of it. But well done all of you, I'm very proud of you. Go team!